All right, let's start. Okay, so today we are going to make a study. So, this is something that was done by a lot of artists, and even today, a lot of artists do that, where you pick a picture from a known artist that you admire or you want to make a study of their work, and there's two ways. One is that you make a picture exactly like theirs, or you reinterpret it in your style, and both things have been done and both are legit. And often you will find pictures or paintings that have this title, something like Haystacks after Van Gogh, or Lily Pond after Monet. So the after is meant to indicate that it is this artist's study of the other artist's work in one way or another. So either making it verbatim or making it as a reinterpretation. So I find that this is it's slightly different from copying in the fact that you reveal whose work you are studying, and it is always titled as a study. So if you are going to take this around and say, oh, look at my work, look at my work, it is your work, but it is a study. So that needs to be clarified. So at any point, if you are claiming another artist's work by copying it, that becomes a copy, but and definitely plagiarism. But if you are going to copy their work exactly the way it is and title it copy of or after so and so artist, that becomes your way of studying it. So the advantages of doing something like this is that you are then suspending all choices that are to be made in creating that artwork. That means you don't think about composition, color, application of strokes, any of that, which you would otherwise have to do when you're making your original work. So, as someone who is learning art, this becomes a vital tool in experiencing the choices made by other artists, and almost stepping into their shoes and doing exactly what they were doing in order to increase your toolbox. So while it's okay that you see some picture and say, oh, I would love to make an ink textural picture, and then you go out into the world and you have this beautiful scene and you have no clue how to convert that into texture. You shouldn't have to face that. There's the same thing if you're interpreting something in oil or watercolor also. So what you do is you break down everything that you see in the picture into its elements. So in this case, we are going to break down textures as we see them in the picture. That's one part. We are going to start recreating those textures. So we're going to train the hand to move a certain way so that we can make those textures. They look rather simple, but there will be some textures that can throw you for a loop. And then there is also the most important and the most ephemeral of all art is composition. That is something that always stumps people in the beginning. You make art and you hope that you are composing it right. There are 50 different ways in which you can compose a picture. You will follow all the rules, finish the picture, and you look at it and you say, how is it that this composition is not working? You have no clue why it works when someone else does it, and then when you try to turn things around and make it your own, it's not working. So composition is something that you really have to learn to feel. And it comes very slowly, and it only comes from experience. The experience of making a lot of art from start to finish, and in the end, looking at a picture and judging whether it is compelling. By compelling, I mean, can you stand and look at it for a long time? Is the picture drawing you in? Are the lines making your eye move around the picture in a certain way that it almost is like a circular loop? It's like a knot structure where you start from one side, go to another, and then come back, and then you go to another. So there's this kind of movement in many pictures that keeps you arrested. That is what we are looking for in a composition. And something that you cannot teach is what you feel. It's very important for you to connect with an artwork. it is important to start understanding your feelings. And as far as I know, nobody teaches you to feel looking at pictures. Nobody asks you about looking at something and say, okay, what do you think about this painting? What is it making you think of? Or how are you responding to the colors or the textures? So I think maybe it is just culturally we are asked to not feel anything, or if you're feeling anything, keep your feelings to yourself. And in this one subject with art, you have to be able to feel and be able to express, and you do not need to express it to somebody. It has to just be nice thought process. Use your words, and if there are questions that come up that I don't know what I feel, even that is a start towards feeling something or the other. So let me recap this whole thing. We are going to build skills to understand how to create those textures with our hands. We are going to build the skill of understanding composition, and then we are also going to learn to respond to that art. That's it. That's all we are going to do today and this week. So I'll share the pictures with you so you know what we're talking about. And for those of you who might not have the dip pen, if you have a fountain pen, you can use that. If you don't have a fountain pen, you can use a micron tip pen. Even that is fine. If you don't have a micron pen, use a pencil. You can make textures in absolutely anything. You don't have to limit yourself to just this tool. All the three goals that we want to achieve today, you will be able to achieve with any of those tools. So here's the picture. Here are the pictures that I've shared. I have a feeling that Sneha and Pari might not have got those pictures, so I will reshare them. But I just want you to have a look right now at how these pictures have been created. So these ink drawings are by Van Gogh, who has a collection of about 1100 drawings made in ink and in a very short period of time. So these sketches essentially were made as studies which he would then convert into paintings. That was the intention of these sketches. Also, as crazy as he was, I'm sure that his fingers were constantly fidgeting, and this was one way that he could keep his fingers doing something and not going completely mad. He might have gone even madder than what he did. Now, in this case, we have a whole bank of textures that he has used to indicate different kinds of leaves. The focus in this picture is mostly the forest. And then you have a foreground, which is just stippled with slightly fat strokes, then slightly thin strokes. You can clearly see a pavement. You can see this beautiful fence, very intricately drawn, and the trees that are silhouetting the fence. So this picture does not have far too much depth, as we'll see in the rest of the pictures. In any picture, you will have a horizon line, but this does not have a clear horizon line. And I'll explain what the horizon line is also when we come to those pictures. So what we enjoy in this picture is just the spray of the different textures. And you can also see the trees for what they might be. All of us can imagine different kinds of trees in this. There are heart-shaped leaves over here, which to people who are from our part of the world would probably look at it and say, maybe this looks like a peepal tree. People who are from the temperate zone might look at it as an oak. So it does not, in the abstractions that the leaves and the strokes are creating, you are free to imagine it for any kind of forest that you are familiar with. Now this picture looks very much like a backyard kitchen garden where all the textures are in the foreground. Now this is a complete contrast in terms of composition to the first picture. We do have a rickety fence in the middle ground. So for those of you who are not familiar with the terms, what you see at the bottom of the picture is the foreground. What you see at the top of the picture is usually the background, unless you have something that is intruding into that space, like some branches which are actually in the front closer to you, but they're only visible in the top of the frame. So we'll come to those as well. And everything between the foreground and the background is the middle ground or mid ground. And you generally distribute your focal point somewhere in one or the other. You don't fill the whole thing up. So in this case, the focal point is the middle ground and what could be the background. But as you can see, it is pretty flat. There isn't too much depth, so we don't even see a background per se. In this case, we do see a background because we see certain rooftops right at the back. You can imagine them at the back. They're usually at the top of the page. And then if you start looking at the textures, there's such delicacy in conveying those textures. This very regular roof pattern juxtaposed with a very shaggy hedge. And then you have what looks like just a mess of a whole lot of circles, which could be flowers, it could be pebbles, it could be a whole lot of things. So there's no point in trying to figure out what it is. You just have to look at it and replicate it, and it'll become whatever it wants to be. All right, the next one. Now here we clearly see a background. There are mountains in the background. There is a house. And then there are two figures here in the middle ground. And the foreground is mostly just grasses maybe, or shrubs, bushes, maybe some flowers. And then you have these imposing trees right in the middle ground, which extend very close to the bottom and go all the way to the top. This is the focal point. It's right bang in the middle of the page. And you are meant to enjoy the structure of the trees. And then very little bit, but just because of the volume, the foreground, the girls are almost hidden. And then behind them you have the trees. So this positioning gives you an idea of the depth. So when you're showing depth, you don't always have to create a mountain that is way high over here just because it's supposed to be very far in the background. All of this depends upon your point of view. So if you are closer to the ground, your eye level is going to be closer to the bottom of the page. If you're really high up, then your eye level or the horizon line will be very high on the page. At some point, we will be doing perspective study, so you will learn more about it at that point. Now this one, look at how high the horizon line is. The horizon line is actually at this base, the base of the mountain. And on top of that, you have this mountain in the background. And then you have all these buildings which start really tiny, and as they come towards the middle ground, they start becoming bigger. You can see how he's even changed the shapes and sizes of same elements, familiar elements through the picture. You have trees which are in the background and in the middle ground and in the foreground. You have carts, you have a horse cart over here, in the middle ground and in the foreground. And then you have grasses which are in the front. Then you have grasses which have been tied up into bales. You have grasses which are still flowing. And the only way you can tell the difference is that you have these stalks, which could well be a fence, or it also could be the stalks of these grasses on the right, which have yet to be harvested. Everything over here is communicated through just texture, and the artist leaves a lot to your imagination, and you will imagine whatever colors you want, whatever crops you want, whatever kind of temperature, season, everything remains your decision over here, your creative decision. So this is one way of enjoying what might be termed as modern art. In fact, the Impressionists were the first people to change art from being just like a painting that you look at and you say, "Oh my God, this really looks like the king so and so," and then also to make it as real as possible. So that is making pictures look realistic. What the Impressionists did was indulge in something called realism. And the difference between the two is that one, realistic pictures make things look like they were real. Realism is where you take topics which are real, which are very, very common, and then you glorify that in a painting. So when you have a pastoral scene like that, which is not like a king riding into a field, or it's not a monumental battle or something, that is a realist, or I guess, yeah, realist painting from the realism kind. Like you have impressionism and you have realism in terms of its theme. All right, so that's enough of history, and now we will get to making those textures. So for today, would you guys like to choose which picture you'd like to make? 1, 2, 3, or 4? You can just vote, and we can then start making it. Because I've made all of these, so I don't want to choose for you. Let me go over them again. So this is one, the path and the trees. This is 2, the backyard. 3, the trees, and 4 is harvest season. Let's go back again. All right, so I have some in chat. 2, 3, 3 or 4, 3. Okay, so overwhelmingly it's 3. Okay, let's do 3 then. All right. Now, I'm going to teach you 2 things here. The first thing we're going to do is figuring out the proportion of this picture. So this is a different math altogether. And the second thing we will do is study the composition through geometric lines. So first and foremost, we have to create a rectangle in our books that matches this proportion. We can use a scale, but that is a very wimpy way to go about it. We don't use scales. So we will use just our wit and our pencil to do this. The first thing to do is break down everything into a simple objective shape. And the most objective shape that we can make over here is a square. Are you able to see this? I think I should change my pen size. So the square is the easiest to make because you can decide on one particular length and you have to make the width exactly the same. But we have to extend the square further. So this is how I use that little bit of math that helped me pass 10th standard. I will draw a line at half of the square. This is very easy to do. We can do this visually. We can also use a pencil to measure the bottom part and then the top part and make sure that it's more or less half. This instantly tells you that the extra part on top is a little bit less than half of our square, right? All right. Now, how much less? Let's divide the square further into more parts. So I'm now drawing this green line at what I'm making as 1/4 of the square that we have drawn. Okay, because it's at half point in half of the square. Okay, this will tell us that again 1/4 is 2 less. If I were to draw a rectangle that is about 1/4 of the original square, that's the red square, I extend space further, that's a little too less. So we have to now divide this even further. Now I'm going to draw a blue line to create 1/8. The division over here is 1/8. Let me do it inside. Let me do it on this side. Because now we have an area which might work. So I'm going to make a rectangle that is, wait for it, 3/8 of our original square. I really apologize for so much maths and fraction. And if you are confused, please ask me again and again. I have no problem explaining. This is about as close as we can get. We're not going to go any more into fractions. This should be enough. So if we draw a rectangle which is 1 unit plus 3/8 of that same unit, we should get the right proportion, at least close to the right proportion. I'm going to share this screenshot so you have this handy, and I'm going to draw this again myself so you don't have to draw it yourselves, and I will break this down again for you. All right. Okay, so you have the measurements in front of you. Is everyone okay with this so far? If you're not, then please let me know. I will help you out. All right. So I'm going to keep my book upright. And what I usually recommend is we make a small rectangle. These textures are going to take a long time. So you don't want to make a picture that's this huge. So we are going to make a rectangle that's about this big, which leaves a lot of room on top in an A4 size page. This room can be used to test out those textures. Now, whatever you do, art, paper, even if it's a test paper, must look very beautiful, which means that we must give a thought to composition. These are the practices in composition that will eventually hold you in good stead when you have to come up with something original. So I'm just going to explain to you what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to start doing it. So don't rush into this. You can just observe what I'm doing and then do it with me. So I'm going to start building my rectangle from the bottom. I'm going to make a line which is about 2 fingers from the bottom edge and about 3 fingers from the side, so that I get to control the width of our picture, the short side of our picture. Once that is drawn, I'm going to use my pencil, and then I'm going to mark a line on the vertical which is exactly the same size. So I get 2 sides of a potential square. Okay, these 2 I'm going to draw. I'm not drawing the whole square. I don't need to. Now once I have drawn this line, I will do the same kind of measurement where I will make a dot at half of this side to mark the half point. Then I will make a dot at half of that, so I mark the quarter, and then I'll make a third point at half of that, so I get that 1/8 measurement. And I just need the distance from the end of the square on top to the 3/8 division from the top. So 1, 2, 3/8 division. I use my pencil or even my fingers again, extend the line a little further, mark the point, and then make the rectangle. Okay, shall we do this? All right. And then I'll tell you what to do on top as well. So 2 fingers from the bottom, mark a spot, 3 fingers from the side. So first from the left, then from the right, and then join these 2 lines. Either you join them or make sure that they're in the vicinity. Yes, Pari, you have a question?
Hello, ma'am. Good evening.
Sorry?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Hi, ma'am. Good evening. I just wanted to ask, what are the specific materials are you using regarding the papers or the sketchbook?
Oh, this is just a regular sketchbook, 130 GSM paper, not very thick paper. And it has
Okay.
to have a smooth finish because we are doing so much textural work. So avoid anything that is cold press.
Okay, got it.
Okay. You
Yes.
could, if you're using a micron pen, you could even use something as simple as printer paper. That also will work.
100 GSM papers would work for this?
Yes. Yes. But don't use liquid ink on them.
Got it.
All
Yes. Okay,
right.
thank you.
Okay. Okay. All right. So marking my width. Even when you're marking this line, you can use your pencil to make sure that the line is straight. I know that using a scale would be so much easier, but remember, a scale, an eraser, and all these tools are always going to be like training wheels. If you depend on them alone, you will never be able to make pictures on the fly. All right, now I keep the pencil at one edge of the line and then keep my finger at the other edge so I know how long my line has to be. Position it on the left over here, and then I can just keep my finger on the left to mark the point. Make sure that it's right above the existing left edge. Use the pencil again to make sure that it is more or less equal. So now we have an L shape. Draw your lines very light so that you don't feel the need to erase them. This is 2 sides of a square. Now use your finger to identify where the half point might be. The finger is very useful because you can slide it up and down to make sure that you're not seeing something wrong. And also, whenever you're taking these measurements, look at your work from the top, like from 90 degrees on. If you're looking at it from the side, the parallax will show you different measurements. The front will look big, so you might land up making your half point a little closer to the front than the back. All right, so here we are. I'm going to mark this as half. Then I'm going to mark another point as 1/4. That's half of the top half. And then over here, this is 1/8. And I'm going to measure this and extend the line further. Now, if you're not sure about keeping your fingers very stiff, use the pencil again. Extend this further. Keep your finger there and draw this line. So now we get the length and we already had the width. You can draw straight lines across and your rectangle is ready. This is the closest approximation of the proportions that we need for our picture. Now, if we don't do this right in the start, there will be a point where either you will have seen the rectangle much bigger, much wider, or taller, and then when you are making those textures, you will end up having a little less space or a little more space. So it's always good to figure out the proportion beforehand. Now, those of you who have paper tapes like these, you can use the tape to seal the edges. If you don't have it, don't worry. We can just make our picture in this, and as you come to the edge, just avoid going too far out of the line. So I will use this tape along the edge Oh, even I've run out, so maybe I won't have tape either. Let's see. The advantages of hoarding are sometimes you just find what you need even when you didn't know you had it. All right. So this is a Chinese brand of tape. If you want, I'll share the link on the group because this is not a regular paper tape that you get because those tapes have a much stickier adhesive and that pulls away all the fibers from the top so much so that it'll tear your paper also. So don't use that. These are nice. They have very little adhesive so it doesn't damage the paper too much. All right, so your page should look somewhat like this. It is a little blank on top. So on this point, again, we can mark a line with dashes so that you can cordon off the area that can potentially be your picture. And if you really like it, just tear on this line and put it up in a frame or on your fridge, or why not just gift it to somebody? Now this is the area where you can make a few circles or rectangles, whichever shape you prefer, to practice your textures. You can make these in pencil and keep ahead of time, or as you need, you can make these. And I generally insist on doing even something like this very neatly because you're going to spend so much time on making all these textures, you might as well make it look attractive. Okay, is everyone with me? Cool. Now let's go to understanding the picture itself. And let me just share this image with everyone again. So it'll come on the group again. Since everyone is on the group, you can then use it as a reference. Okay, so now we have to understand how to break up all the space that we have made into the right places for the right textures. So while all this looks like just some scribbles here or there is obviously some order and some kind of flow in the pictures. Now, each person has the freedom to see whatever they want to see in this picture. They can see whatever flow, whatever composition, and whatever lines work for you. I'm going to show you a few that work for me. They may be the way that you may see some parts, they may not. That's completely okay. So, first and foremost, let's identify where the horizon is. This line at the base of the mountains is the horizon. Now we can tell again that this is not halfway up. It's a little less than halfway up the picture. The red lines are just the objective grid. So an objective grid is one which you just mark on spots regardless of what the picture is saying. And the blue lines are going to be an internal composition line which will help you to see how the lines on the picture flow. So we have the horizon line, then below that we have a line of where the houses are placed, then below that we have a line where the bush ends from the bottom on the left. On the top it rises a little bit. Then on the second blue line is where you will see mostly the bulk of the trees coming in. And the tree on the left goes almost straight up, occupying the second half of the vertical halfway mark. And the trees on the right create a beautiful triangle. Now, this triangle on the top is balanced by this triangle on the bottom. And in that triangular space, you see depth. You can almost imagine that these girls in the front might have started walking somewhere in the back, that is the back, and this is the front of the picture. So we get a sense of depth with just how you have shaped these elements. Now, again, to balance this out, we have one more triangle made here. So we are creating an area of texture which acts almost like a nest in which these two little girls are placed. So somehow the girls are the focus, but the focal point, but the focus remains on the trees. So it's almost as if they are shrouded or shielded by the trees. In this way, if you start using composition, then you can also start adding meaning to your paintings. And often you will see these as hidden meanings in famous paintings that when an expert tells you, you say, oh my God, I didn't even think of it like that. That's a moment like this. Okay, so I'm going to share this with you, and I want you to visually break up your spaces into these shapes to begin with. All right. Let me share the image. So in this picture also, remember the lines are only drawn where you need them. I can easily draw a line. One second, I think this is not straight. So I can hint at a vertical center by drawing a line on the paper. So you can draw the line or a marker outside of your rectangle. And again, you can use your pencil, or if you have another tool, except a scale to figure out whether you are doing it right. If you still need help, you can draw a very light dotted line to indicate this center. You don't have to draw 5-6 lines because that's not part of your picture. Do the same thing now. This is our whole length from inside edge to inside edge. Center will change. I will draw a horizontal center as well. So we've got these like crosshairs. And now we want to visually draw the lines. We have the line of the trees at a little higher than 1/3. And then the top of that area is broken into three parts. Draw a line halfway through the first half of the vertical that we have made. Then a line going at an angle from the center, top point to right horizontal center, then coming down to where the second line is after the center horizontal, you will draw a line that goes from this point to just a little shy of the left bottom edge, and then you will draw another line, and these two lines are not parallel. They open out almost like radiating outward. I know the pencil lines are very light and some of you might not even be able to see it, but you could just use the reference of the reference image that I've shared right now, and you should be good. Okay, now let's first draw these human figures. They are on this bottom line. That's the reference that I'm using. And I'm just going to draw a, a head, like an oval here and an oval there. And then just draw an inverted U shape over here again, an inverted, maybe a C shape like that. These are the only two challenging shapes, I think, that can discourage you. But don't forget to marvel at how he's been able to show, even in that much space, a hand that is probably holding a bag or a bouquet, and another hand that is again holding something over here. They also have beautiful hairstyles, very delicately made. And one of the faces you can tell is also looking down. Don't, I mean, just marvel. If you can't make it, don't worry about it. As long as just so much is made, that's fine. Now, this gives us a starting point. And you can use these figures as a reference point from where we will draw the other parts of the picture. So one tree is here. You also have two distinct branches and a curved trunk. And we are going to replicate the borders, so the outlines of these trees in some of the same strokes that you see them. So do not draw a random cloud like that. You really don't need to. Just draw a few hints of the same texture. If you feel that you need more guidelines, feel free to use your pencil to figure out where the center might be on the top, or if you want to use your lines to get a sense of direction. And draw a few lines on both sides so you get the right scale. As usual in any picture, scale is rather important. Scale of your strokes, scale of the tree with respect to the proportion of the girls. That's what is going to make the picture look like the reference image. But always remember that even if we were to get Van Gogh himself to draw this picture again, he will not be able to make the picture exactly like this. So don't expect that your picture is going to look 100% stroke to stroke exactly like this picture. It's not. So let's just not even consider that as an option. But then what it can easily do is make the textures look evocative of Van Gogh's work. That's the best that we can hope for. So this is one way of making outlines on objects which have textures, where you don't draw the outline in a line that cuts through that texture. We will be using similar lines, which I call fences, when you're drawing something like hair or fur. Now, at every point, you will have some kind of indicator of how far a texture has to go. Like now, I have drawn the left side, the trees, and I'm coming to the right, and when I come closer to the girls, I know how there is a negative space almost in the shape of an F over here. So I have to make sure that I too draw something that looks like an F. Now the F is the space where there are no textures. You can see a little bit of the backdrop horizon through the trees, but essentially there's no leaves or trees there. And then there is again a trunk of a tree. Then there's texture, 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 coming to about halfway mark here. And then you have another trunk. And this trunk is slightly higher than this trunk. And then there's another tree at, again, 1/4 mark on the right. So just so you know, if I am doing a study like this on my own, which I rarely get to do now, I am sometimes talking to myself exactly like how I am telling you to do this. So it can be very entertaining also. And it helps you to sometimes just work out the problem of what I should do, where should I do it like this, should I do it like that. So I guess that's also one way of getting in touch with yourself. How's everyone doing so far? Are you comfortable doing this? Okay, so while you're doing this, please remember to breathe. Don't hold your breath, don't bite your lip, don't stiffen your body up. It's just a painting. Everything will be fine. I can guarantee you at the end of it, no matter what happens, it will look good. Now remember, we have to do this in ink, so don't make the entire texture in pencil. We are just marking the outlines. So once you know what goes where, you can start your ink work. Now my strategy is to go from the known to the unknown. So mark a certain area that you can see the texture of, understand how to make it, and then start making that. It is very easy to get overwhelmed with pictures like these, which have so much texture, and then you lose your place. You don't know whether you're here or there.
Lost, and then it's like, where am I?
Exactly. So right now, if you have made the trees, let's just finish or at least begin making the texture of the trees and these girls and a little bit of the brush at their feet. Let everything go. And once that area is filled, it's like fill in the blanks. Once these blanks are filled, then the remaining space you will be able to see what you can fill in over there. All right, so those of you who are working with ink, if you've not worked through the week or even today, if you've not touched it, add a few drops of water to the ink. This ink is designed to evaporate and become thicker and thicker and thicker. So you won't get enough hairlines if you don't add water. So use a dropper or just use a teaspoon or something and drop in some water. And then use a toothpick or anything but your nib to stir the water carefully. I had a kids class yesterday and they had there's one kid who enjoyed poking my potato with my toothpick and now he's broken it. So you take your stirrer all the way to the bottom and you'll notice that it has become a little goopy at the bottom. This is the PH Martin Black Star ink for those of you who have joined today. And this ink is the best ink to use for ink illustration because it is completely waterproof, and you can dilute it even to a ratio of 1:4, 1:5. I think 1:10 becomes a bit much. Okay, so I'm just going to show you how I would like you to do this exercise. At no point are you going to make a line more than maybe a centimeter long. So essentially, our artist made everything in short strokes. So even these girls, they're going to be drawn in short strokes like that. If you go ahead and make this really long, very expert artist like line, they're going to stand out of the painting and not in a good way. So we are necessarily going to make very short lines, and the details that you cannot see in the picture where I've drawn all the lines, you can see in the original. So go back a few frames on your device and you will see it. Okay, can you see this? Short strokes only. In a way, making these short strokes makes life much easier because these strokes are about the size of the alphabets we write. So you don't have to have the dexterity that's generally required of artists. The arms on these ladies are huge, by the way. Huh? There's a word in Marathi for this, Ajanubahu. If I were to measure this girl's hand, when her hand is drawn, it's going to come up to her knees, which is what it's supposed to mean, apparently. But again, here's a learning moment. In the grand scheme of this picture, it doesn't seem to matter that she's got humongous arms. And I don't know what she's even holding. So just repeat the strokes. We don't have to know what it is. The less you think about what is drawn, the better your drawing will be. Okay?
More than just the numbers on a paycheck. Working hard on pages to live less. Oh my God, I'm waiting for the recess. Give me strength to change my life. I need this. I need somebody.
Those of you who are working with the nib, you can try pressing the nib in a few areas and see how that changes the texture, the look of the texture. Now, if you're unsure of your texture, this is where you can bring in the trial piece. Try making a little bit of the tree texture here. Look at how long the strokes need to be, how close they need to be to each other, and also to each clump. It's very likely that some of you are doing this, where you're making all the strokes even and then leaving space and doing this, and this is not going to look good at all. It is going to give you gaps in between the stroke clumps which are not seen in the original illustration. So make this, study it, correct it, and then you can attempt again. There's enough time to change what you're doing if you're not sure and if you feel that you can make it different. That's the whole
About
point.
the strokes once more.
So the strokes are nestled into each other and they go often from a large to a small size. Sometimes they can also be directional, so they can do something like this. But what happens is often we are not looking at the original image. So you feel that I have to just draw C's, so I'll draw C's and they're all the same size. And then I draw C's in the opposite direction, so then they're all the same size. And that size then may make the texture look very different. So if you think about it, in this space above the girls' heads, I have a series of just about 3 clumps of C shapes, all pointing in the same direction. This part is the one job that we have to do. So look at the size of these strokes, the direction of them, direction of the line, and the density of the line, how they are placed next to each other. In some places you will see them as S strokes. So are they S strokes or is it an illusion that is created because of the juxtaposition of the strokes? See? So this is going to be a very slow process. Don't try to rush it. Speed is not really a virtue in art, and definitely not in this task. Having said that, I have a feeling that Van Gogh actually painted this very feverishly. Now, once in a while, people who are using a nib, please wipe your nib, because as you can see, my nib, I've been using this for the whole week. It gets coated with the ink, and I can remove the ink by putting it in a potato and allowing the starch to dislodge it a little bit. But beyond a point, even that potato starch doesn't work. So once you inserted it a couple of times, you can try removing some of the ink. Avoid washing it with soap and water. It seems like the most natural thing to do. These nibs are made of steel, but they're not totally rust proof. There's some places between the two trees. Oh, that's quite a tongue twister. I'm going to be making true trees very soon. Two trees that the strokes are a little thicker. At those points, those people with nibs can press the brush down a little bit, and those who are using a regular pen could use a thicker point nib if you want to. So if you're using a 0.2 or 0.3, use a 0.8 in these sections, a 0.8. And the section in between the first tree where it's not so dark, there you can make the texture really sparse. So increase the space between the textured lines. But you could also wipe your brush nib a little bit, remove some of the ink, and just use hairlines. No pressure, very little ink. In some places where the lines are dark or the texture is really dark, there are overlapping lines. And behind some of these you will see a gray texture. So we will make that texture using I think a watercolor or a pencil. So don't try to make the dense lines so thick that you're trying to replicate that texture. That is not a texture made with lines. It's definitely got ink, but maybe a lighter ink that has been painted over. This is something that we are going to be doing next week, but in order to get the right values in this picture, we might add a little bit of watercolor later on. Okay, now if you've got a handle on the texture of the trees, you can complete this on your own. But let me show you the texture that we have in the foreground. Now you should be able to see that better. So first and foremost, when you are looking at the reference image, avoid the temptation to magnify, because when you magnify it, you will see the same texture much bigger, and there's a chance that you will make larger units of the texture than are required there. So just avoid it. Draw exactly and only what you see. So I see some circles clumped together over here and a lot of scratchy textures, and I get an overall form that looks like what I see in the pictures. A few dots here or there, very casually drawn. These could be pebbles, these could be flowers, whatever it is. Some half circles are also there. So I'm trying to get the shape and also in the distribution that I see them. They're not just one flat line. So like we drew the trees, I'm drawing an outline around the area to mimic those shapes. And then I will fill this up with an overall texture of the same. Some of the circles are also filled in. And then there are some just dots over here. And then we can draw a completely different texture. These are much curved seas. And you have some vertical, well, some lines, not vertical, but at an angle. this will start filling up. Where there is negative space, keep it light. Do not put any texture there, because that is used as relief between textures. That could indicate highlights, it could indicate just a change in uh, the texture in the scenery. And then there are sections where it is dark, and there the lines are much denser. These lines could very well indicate the shadows of the trees, and they have been placed here so that they can silhouette around the figures of the girls and make them visible. Now this part I'm going to texture, and I'm going to show you how to fill watercolor in this, because you may not be able to do it right now. I would actually like you to finish the texture and then fill the watercolor in, but I would like to show you how it has to be done so there's no mystery there. So I've basically just marked the area where I'm going to put that dark paint patch. If you go closer, you will see that there are some light black lines also. Those can be made in pencil also to fill up the space, or could have been in a chalk or a different colored ink. It could be the same ink that's even watered down. So I'm using watercolor. And you can use a medium or thin brush for this. Okay. Would you like to just observe this for 2 minutes? You can keep your pens down. So I'm going to take a rather watery black. Oh, sorry. It's not too thick. And again, test it out first against my ink to see what kind of shade I'm getting. I don't want it to be too dark. And this can be applied with a thin brush. So if it creates a texture of its own, that's fine. So this will give us the tonal uh, variation that our picture does need. Some places this gray also is a little lighter. See, it changes the values on texture completely. And I think a little bit of this is also in the sky and the backdrop. Even that can be done. But remember, you should do this only after you've finished most of the texturing, and do erase the pencil lines. Pencil lines sometimes become opaque, or no, they get sealed if you do not erase them before you apply watercolor. And you don't want that. You don't want these absolutely stick straight lines in an ocean of wavy lines. You'll feel really bad about it afterwards.
After the watercolor, do we do lines over it again, or we just leave that portion like
No, you can.
that? Yeah, huh?
Can. But just wait for the watercolor to dry completely. And that might take a little longer than you might think, because this ink can then just spread and smudge. That's why best to keep very little bit of the line work remaining after you have watercolored. Okay. Alright, so this is going to keep you busy for the whole week, I think. Hopefully not. You can also attempt the other pictures.
I have a question here. So we did mark some part in watercolor, and I see the entire image kind of as a tint. So is this going to be restricted to certain sections of the picture, or are we going to do a light wash throughout?
You
How
can
is
do a
it?
light wash throughout. I was just
Okay.
about to say, even the sky and the background seems to have some kind of a wash. So go ahead and do it, because then that will match the original picture in its tonal variation throughout.
Got it.
Okay, the few lines in the sky though, they are really, really light. So those lines, if you want, you can convert those to pencil lines, because the depth of that dark in the trees is different from the lines that you see in even the grasses in the middle ground. So if you make them black, maybe it might just be too stark and could flatten the picture. So the one advantage in changing color and making it lighter in the background is colors in the background are often much lighter, duller, fuzzier. So in keeping with that perspective rule, you can change that also as you go along. All right.
Original, would this have been different shades of ink, or would this be pencil and ink?
I suspect this painting could have been made in a sepia ink. What we see as the dark background is probably just aged paper, because I don't see any washes as such in the background. And remember, these pictures were just studies to understand texture and composition.
Yeah, I think
So,
we did the same thing in watercolor without the girls.
yeah, there must have been something similar. So it's a I I'm just trying to understand from Van Gogh's methodology. I really don't think he had the liberty to go out in the field with hajar materials and say, okay, now I'm going to very thoughtfully put a wash here. And I don't think that was his nature, but I could be wrong. What I see is a little bit of pigmentation in the sky area, and then it's too uniform to be a wash. So but I've not seen this painting in real life. I've not seen this sketch, so it could be just tinted paper also. Uh, to your question about ink, I have a feeling that this could be a combination of black or a dark ink along with a sepia colored ink. So some parts might be brown, some parts might be slightly darker. May not be two different colors distinctly, but definitely adding a shade of one to the other to create the difference between the two tones.